All right, we're diving straight into a massive, totally mind-bending paradigm shift today from physicist Thomas Campbell. It's called his Big TOE, which literally stands for Big Theory of Everything. Now, I want you to keep this sort of infinite zoom visual in the back of your mind as we go through this explainer. Why? Because we're going to journey all the way from the microscopic data processing of our own minds right out to the ultimate cosmic reality of human existence. It's an incredible system that finally bridges the gap between hard quantum mechanics and human consciousness. Okay, let's dive into this. And to do it justice, I really need you to keep a completely open mind here. Seriously, I want you to entertain a profound, maybe even crazy-sounding question. What if the physical universe doesn't actually exist? Like, what if physical matter isn't the fundamental base of reality at all, but rather everything around us is actually just a stream of information? So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to logically zoom out, step by step. First, we'll look at why consciousness is fundamental. Then, the idea of a virtual reality universe. Next, how we actually access this cosmic data stream, followed by how intention modifies our future. And finally, we'll look at the ultimate purpose of the whole shebang, evolving toward love. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1. Consciousness is fundamental, because for the last century there's been this massive missing piece that has absolutely stumped quantum physicists. You know, even the absolute greatest scientific minds, the founding fathers of quantum mechanics like Einstein, Bohr, and Schrödinger, they actually recognized that consciousness was the key to understanding reality. At the bottom of all of this is consciousness, they realized, and that physics can be derived from it. But here's the catch. Without a logical, mathematical framework to prove exactly how physics derives from consciousness, modern science essentially just threw its hands up. They kind of labeled all those strange quantum behaviors as just weird physics and, well, moved on. And that leads us to a massive clash of perspectives. On one side, we've got materialism. This is the idea that physical matter is the fundamental reality. It's what our entire culture defaults to, usually without us even realizing it. But Campbell's Big Toe, it completely flips the script. He argues that information and consciousness are the actual base, and physicality is just derived from it. Honestly, it's a huge paradigm shift. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to talk about entropy. Now, in physics, entropy is simply a measure of disorder or chaos in a system. When you've got high entropy, you've got chaos. But when you lower entropy, you create order, you create information, and you create the ability to do actual work. In Campbell's framework, consciousness is an information system, and it evolves in one very specific way, by lowering its entropy, basically moving from chaos to order. So if we zoom all the way down to the micro level, Campbell defines the absolute simplest unit of consciousness as an information system doing just 3 exact computational steps. 1, it takes in data. 2, it processes that data against its memory. And 3, it outputs a binary choice, 1 or 0, yes or no. That's it. That is the fundamental building block of reality. Now, if that single digital choice is the micro level, let's jump into Section 2 and zoom out to the macro level of our entire existence, the virtual reality universe. In this framework, the universe is quite literally a virtual reality simulation. I mean it. Our bodies, the walls around us, the screen you're looking at right now, it's all just eye candy in a simulation. It's a massive data stream, and we are individual units of consciousness. Think of us as avatars, interpreting this data stream based on our own personal experiences, our fears, and our beliefs. So you might be wondering, how did this simulation even start? Well, pre-universe, the system was basically just a slow evolving cosmic chat room where consciousness entities communicated using really shallow rules. To speed things up, it initiated a digital Big Bang, creating a new rule set with initial plasma conditions. And that eventually evolved into our present, the Earth simulator. It's a highly emotional, high-stakes reality where we avatars make choices to learn and evolve much faster. Which brings us to Section 3, accessing the data stream. Because once you grasp that it's a simulation, you start to see the fascinating ways our human avatars can actually hack into it by tapping into the intuitive, non-logical side of our consciousness. The thing is, this database doesn't have a fixed output format. When you request info from the simulation, it comes to you in a format you can understand. For example, Campbell shares this wild personal anecdote where he started seeing life force energy as fluffy cotton candy wrapped around trees. Later on, as a trained physicist, he learned to request health data as literal charts with error bars popping up in his mind's eye.
Or, think about savants. They aren't sitting there mathematically calculating pi to 20 decimal places in their heads. They're just intuitively pulling that unfiltered data straight from the system.
Now, this kind of data access is usually blocked by our noisy, highly logical intellect. Campbell actually studied this incredible remote viewing class where grown adults learned to read while completely blindfolded. And the most fascinating part, they all felt like they were cheating. Their logical brains just absolutely refused to accept that this intuitive data was real. So the brain literally invented an excuse, like imagining a tiny fake hole in the blindfold, just to allow the visual information to pass through. How crazy is that?
So the crucial takeaway here is this. When we look at mystical practices, we're almost always confusing the tool with the active ingredient. Reiki symbols, burning incense, chanting specific mantras, these are just psychological tools. They exist solely to distract and bypass your logical intellect. The only real active ingredient in any of these practices is the consciousness itself. That's a quieted intellect combined with a deeply focused intention.
Let's move right along to Section 4 and look at the mechanics of this active ingredient. Intention modifies future probability. This is where we shift from just viewing the data to actively altering the code.
In this theory, the future is absolutely not a done deal. It's just a database of probabilities. Every single choice you make shifts things, and your deep, intuitive intention actively modifies the likelihood of future outcomes within that database. Whether that's manifesting a major life change or even facilitating physical healing, your intention directly tweaks the probability.
But hey, you can't just casually wish for things. Effective intention requires 4 very distinct steps. First, you've got to quiet the intellectual noise in your head. Second, you focus deeply from your intuitive core, not your ego. Third, you maintain that focus over time. It can't just be a passing thought. And fourth, it has to align with the system's purpose of lowering entropy. This is exactly why selfish, ego-driven wishes, like, wishing to win the lottery or trying to manifest a shiny new sports car, totally lack power. They come from the noisy intellect and completely contradict the overall system's goal of cooperation and growth.
And this brings us to the climax of the explainer, resuming all the way out to Section 5, the ultimate, global purpose of this massive virtual reality experiment, evolving toward love.
This leads right into Campbell's brilliantly simple ethical conclusion. When you apply the physics concept of entropy to a social system made up of conscious avatars, it maps perfectly onto human morality. High entropy in a society? That looks like fear, chaos, grabbing resources, control, and force. But lowering entropy, creating order and harmony in a social system, is exactly what we call love, cooperation, peace, and helping float the boat for everyone. The actual physics of lowering entropy translates directly to evolving toward love.
Now, humanity has been slowly crawling along this evolutionary path for roughly 200,000 years. And for most of that time, our progress away from a warlord, high-entropy mentality was incredibly slow. But today, thanks to rapid global communication and the internet, ideas are spreading like wildfire at the speed of light. We are finally hitting the exponential curve of consciousness evolution.
And here is the really great news. We don't actually need everyone on Earth to wake up all at once. Campbell believes that if just 10% of the population hits a mainstream tipping point, meaning they're actively modeling this low-entropy, love-based, cooperative existence, their dramatically lower stress and higher quality of life will become completely undeniable. The remaining 90% of society will just naturally be dragged along toward that better way of living.
Because true global change doesn't happen by just replacing dictators or swapping out corporate CEOs. Think about it. If the underlying culture doesn't change, the next leader is going to act the exact same way. Fixing the world is an inside job. It happens by changing individual minds to outgrow the fear-based ethics of materialism. And as the scientific community begins to fully embrace reality as an information system, this massive cultural shift is only going to accelerate.
So I want to leave you staring into the infinite zoom of your own life with this final profound question. If reality really is just a simulation, a high-stakes training ground designed to test your ability to choose love, help others, and lower entropy, what choice are you going to make today?